So normally by now I would be sharing my tarot and oracle deck intentions for this month, which is November 2025. However, I'm not going to be doing that today, so stick around to find out why. But first, let me know how your October went in terms of your tarot and oracle reading practice. Did you pre-select your decks, or were you inspired by the spooky season, obviously Halloween taking place, or Samhain, or were you a little bit more free-flowing? As I'm no longer doing an intention video, whether you are new or returning, welcome to my very first official wrap-up video. In this video, I'm going to explain why I'm no longer doing deck intention videos. I will share which decks I actually used instead of the decks that I plan to use, and if you'd like to see what I plan to use, check out this video here. I've been on a bit of a spiritual deep dive actually, and I think that's one of the reasons why I've moved away from some of the decks that I'd planned to use. So within that there have been crazy visual meditations. I've done a couple of courses with some of Hay House's bigger authors. I'm going to share what I'd learned from those experiences, and I'm also going to share the books that I've been reading to help me with this spiritual deep dive that I've been going on this month. And there's been a lot of astrology in there, so if you're interested in how tarot and astrology fit together, then stick around. Now, you may or may not be interested in all of this content, so I will be leaving timestamps in the description below, so you can skip to the bits which are most relevant to you. So after a lot of thought, I have made the decision to put on hold my intention videos. It's been on my mind for a couple of months, and it'd always been my plan to see this through for the whole year and see if I could go month by month for 2025 to set intentions and stick to them. But the last couple of months it really has gone by the wayside. As I acquire new decks to my collection, I am finding that I'm just not sticking to the things that I've set out to do, and I've decided this is not really a sustainable practice for me. And I know many of you out there like to choose intuitively, and this month being guided to be a bit more drawn intentionally to other decks. In terms of decks, well, tarot decks that I used this month, I think I had a few more on my list. The TOMAR Tarot and the Crow Tarot were part of my intentions, but I didn't really do a great deal of tarot readings, I've got to be honest. I've been working more with oracle decks, which I'll talk about in a moment. But for those of you that haven't seen this, so the TOMAR Tarot has been a real deep dive for me in terms of a study deck, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the books section. Some of you will know that I've been a beta reader for Debs Allen, the creator of this deck, for her 5-part manual, and Debs will be coming on the channel very soon to talk about the manual and this beautiful deck that she has created. I have had a little play with her adjustment spread, which is an alternative take on the past, present, future spread, but I think it has a lot of potential. Hoping to chat a bit more in depth with Debs about that. But this body of work that Debs has created, I've mentioned this before, has really opened up tarot on a whole new level for me, which I'm super excited about. I mentioned astrology in the beginning of the video, and this deck has a lot of astrological references. So as I said, yeah, if you're interested in astrology, you may want to check out this deck. What Debs has cleverly done is she's embedded the astrological symbols within the card, which also has additional meaning to help you understand that card a little bit further. It's super fascinating. In addition to that, I have been doing a little bit more work with my recently acquired Crow Tarot, which some of you will remember I got from my mum, who had this deck and she no longer wanted it. I have been working with Morrigan Energy, so it seems a perfect deck to be working with. I was going to pair it with the Urban Crow Oracle by the same creator, and yeah, this is probably as kind of spooky as my decks have got. I don't actually have any sort of Halloweeny decks. I think the closest I've got is the Samhain Oracle, which I've only just started using this month, but I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the Season of the Witch Samhain deck, because that's been out for a good couple of years now. I really enjoyed using this deck, particularly because I also happen to have the extended guidebook which MJ Cullinane created, and what I particularly like, you are given the symbolism within each card, and this spread in particular, this is not necessarily how the cards were arranged, but there were some definite repeating images. So for instance, the poppies here, we had quite a few fish on here and cages, so it was fascinating to come back to this book and read the symbolic significance of some of these images. And I know you get that in most tarot decks, but I feel like MJ Cullinane's made that quite explicit as a real thing that you can work with when using this deck. And I should say, you don't get any of that information in the little book that comes with this deck. So if you enjoy this deck and you haven't got the complete guidebook, I would recommend it, because it definitely takes this deck to a whole deeper level. And I'm definitely excited to be exploring the symbolism held within this deck a little bit more, and if I set any intention this month, it will probably to revisit this deck at some stage. I mentioned that it's been a month for oracle decks as opposed to tarot decks this month, because one of the courses I did was the Rebecca Campbell 3-day oracle card reading challenge, which means that I got to play with these two decks here, which are relatively new to me, the Healing Waters Oracle and the Ancient Stones Oracle, and I have fallen in love with both of these decks, and so naturally I have felt very drawn to using these decks. The reason I wanted to do the Rebecca Campbell challenge really was just to see how quite a high profile oracle reader or oracle deck creator goes about really reading her own cards. And it was a really useful course. She gave away some free resources. I mean, obviously it was to advertise her certification course, but for a freebie, I think it was totally worth it. And yeah, I definitely feel more confident using her decks now. As you might imagine, for Rebecca, it's a very intuitive, whole sense approach, as she's sort of a mystic, a writer, an artist. And you know, you get that vibe from her decks anyway. But I found that the readings have been super powerful, particularly from the Ancient Stones here. Now, I don't know, I'm gonna put this out here, being a Virgo and an earth sign, I think perhaps that sort of earthy energy just really resonates with me. But for those of you who've watched my videos before, you will know that I'm a big fan of her decks anyway. But yeah, I just love the vibe and the energy that comes off of these cards individually and as a collective. Something else I played about with, which is something I mentioned in a previous video, was actually using these decks as one big super deck, which actually worked just as well as I'd hoped. And I was keen to do this for a number of reasons. I think there's something very, I want to say, unspoken about the messages that you get from Rebecca's decks, whereas I'd say the Season of the Witch decks are very kind of grounded and earthy. Yeah, the Rebecca Campbell decks are just on a whole new kind of plane, if you like, and I think it's probably because they do deal with more subtle energies, that they're the sort of, they give you the sort of messages, the things that are unseen, if that makes sense. Let me know below which is your favourite Rebecca Campbell deck. One thing I did manage to stick to from my intentions was to do a daily draw from Season of the Witch Mabon Oracle, but to do a little drawn record of the card that I was pulling each day, and I think I only missed a couple of days. The most intriguing thing about this, and some of you will have seen my post about stalker cards, is that the stalker cards that cropped up, and I had 2 or 3, one being the cacao card, the other being the elderberry card, and the maple tree card. These cards all came out when I did the Mabon equivalent Celtic crossbred that was included in the guidebook here, which I've experienced before in other Season of the Witch decks as well. In fact, I think every one where I have started the season with the recommended Celtic cross, yeah, the cards just come up time and time again. So let me know if you have also experienced that. This was another card that came up for me, and I think I had Mountain Cabin a couple of times, as I said, all of which came up in the Celtic cross equivalents. I've absolutely loved using this deck, and the lovely Rachel from I Am Rachel described this deck as it being like a bit of a hug, and I totally 100% agree with her. There's just something very warming and comforting, even though there are some quite dark, shadowy cards within this deck. Now moved on to the Season of the Witch Samhain Oracle, and I was all ready to do the Celtic cross spread, and there isn't one. This was the first Season of the Witch deck that I bought, so I'd obviously forgotten, so it's been almost a year since I've used it. But yeah, there's not a Celtic cross in here. Now, I kind of like things to all be even, so even in the fact that they all have the same spread, but it's not to be. So I chose the next best thing, which was the Coming of Winter spread, for my insight into the forthcoming month. In terms of the books that I've read, there's only one that I've pretty much read front to back, cover to cover, which is the TOMAR Tarot, which I mentioned earlier. Oh my word, this book has completely blown me away and explored tarot to a whole new level. And I think, you know, I've been dabbling with tarot since about 2020, but I've only really started taking it seriously in the last couple of years, and particularly since starting this YouTube channel. So I feel like I was ready for a more comprehensive overview of the tarot system, which is what the TOMAR Tarot does. And at the moment, this is only available as a PDF, and as I said, we've got Debs coming on the channel very soon to talk a little bit more about that. I will link information about this if this has already whet your appetite and you sound interested in this. But what Deborah has done is to really provide a holistic insight into the tarot system, and doesn't just look at Rider-Waite-Smith, but goes a little bit further back, and looks upon the other systems, so the Golden Dawn, how kind of Jungian ideas fit in. She has even gone back to kind of Greek philosophy, like Pythagoras and things like that, and just really put a lot of the ideas into context. So I've talked about the Ultimate Guide to Tarot before, and this is great if you're a beginner because it gives you sort of general information. So rather than looking at it as a kind of like tarot as your town that you live in and you sort of know the main features, what the TOMAR Tarot does is really zoom out and look at it from kind of a planet perspective and all the little aspects and how things interlink, which I found super helpful, because in a lot of the other books that I have, you've kind of got the information, but it doesn't flow in such a way that this book does. And this is a book that I'm going to be coming back to time and time again. And I just love the way that Deborah has explained it. I feel really privileged to have had access to this printed version, and to connect with Debs, and yeah, really looking forward to our chats in hopefully the end of this week. As I said, the TOMAR Tarot has a lot of astrological correspondence, and also the planets and the energies that surround that. So that really sort of whet my appetite. And so I have dug out my Dorley Kinsley astrology book, which I got this a few years ago. And I've got to be honest, I chose this book because there's a lot of pictures in there, and I thought, yeah, pictures, not too much bulky text, but I still didn't understand it. In conjunction with looking at this, I have been revisiting Moonology. So one of the other courses I did was the Yasmin Boland course. I can't remember the exact title of it, but it involved Moonology and looking at your astrological rising sign, how that influences the 12 houses in your birth chart, and how you can use that to magnify your manifesting with the moon, which I find intriguing. And the more I sort of tap away at this or dig away at it, sort of combining this book, my astrology book, and the information in the TOMAR Tarot, is really, it's starting to embed itself. So I'm the sort of person that I'll just read something really quickly, I will understand it at the time, and then I forget, so I have to keep going back to stuff. But with the TOMAR Tarot and with Moonology, there are sort of practical steps that you can take, and at some stage I'm going to be doing a bit more of a deep dive on my birth chart, to try and unlock some of these ideas a little bit further. And when I do, I'll be sharing that with you, because actually discovering astrology and discovering some of the things in my birth chart is starting to help me make sense of some of the quirks that I have that I couldn't understand why I did those things, but yeah, it sort of unlocked a lot for me. Finally, I have also been returning to this book here, which is by Rebecca Campbell. It is Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It. I bought this back in the spring. This book deals with topics to do with the dark night of the soul, a transformative and healing process on a soul level, a bit like, I guess, going into hibernation and maybe bringing to life a new version of yourself, but in that process we're invited to let go of things that no longer serve us, facing our fears, really doing the work. And when I bought this, I just couldn't get to grips with it. As I said, I bought it in the spring, and I just don't think it was the right time to be engaging with the topics in this book. And obviously we've now had the autumn equinox, we've just had the festival of Samhain, and I think now as we head towards winter and the winter solstice, this is a really good time to be engaging with these topics, to go a little bit deep, perhaps do some shadow work, which I have also been exploring with my visual journals, and really sort of getting to the grips of you know, what I want from life, and what I need to do in order to take those next steps and to bring about change and transformation. The cards keep telling me that I'm going through this phase of transformation, and I think it's about listening to what the cards are saying, but also trying to tap into in my sort of subconscious to sort of work out what that actually means for me. And it's going to be a long process. Rebecca talks about this in the book, that for some people this process can go on for years, and I think perhaps on many levels I have been going through this process, but I think it's only within this year, and also since discovering tarot and just being aware that this is even a thing, and as I've become more spiritual, and sort of analysing myself a little bit more on a subconscious level, and you know, if you're going through a similar phase, I would recommend this book. It's Rebecca has a really beautiful way of wording things and expressing those things which are challenging and difficult and painful, but in a nurturing way, so it doesn't make it feel quite as daunting. In terms of working with my subconscious and exploring the themes of the dark night of the soul a little bit further, I've been doing a lot of meditations, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video, and recording them in terms of visual journals, and I'm not going to go into details with these just yet, but it turns out that the Morrigan who I started working with has sort of introduced me to Mother Bear, who invited me to dance around the fire with her for insight as to what any of this means. I've been using song lyrics in the background as a starting point. I've also got a sort of shadow work playlist that I use to help me get into the right frame of mind, but this has been a fascinating process. I've also been working with other guides. This one looks a little bit scary. It's not, but it was a very strong vision that I had, and a character that I created a while back in doll form has come back to me quite a lot recently, so it's something that I'm going to be paying attention to. But the main takeaway from these is that although I've been trying to push my creative work, I should be resting, and this is a period of hibernation for me. This idea of kind of a hibernation phase is picked up in this book. So Rebecca talks about the different phases of your life, and I wasn't sure, but these meditations have confirmed that this is a sort of should be a hibernation and period of rest, and that's also been reflected in many of the readings that I have been doing. And for me, it's just working out how to do that, but still do baby steps to make progress with some of the many creative plans that I have, but you know, trying not to burn myself out. The third and final course that I did was Colette Baron Reid's Spirit of My Business Masterclass. This was wild in terms of the meditation that I had, and you know, I won't go into too much detail about what was involved in the meditation, but I will leave you with this slightly unfinished drawing. But this is what I saw in this meditation, where I met the spirit of my business, which turns out to be Casper the Clown, who is one of the main characters in the tarot deck that I'm designing, and he has gifted me a blue glowing heart. Obviously, in the workshop that Colette delivered, she talks about how you can use this information to help bring some of these creative projects or these passion projects to life, but doing it from a soul spiritual perspective, as opposed to, you know, the hard sell, the hard graft, hustling, which is a really unique way of looking at it, and it's not something I've come across before. So I'm just going to lead with curiosity on this, and see where this meditation and this process takes me, and because there were a couple of other meditations that followed this initial one, which hopefully over time, if I come back and redo them, will give me clues from my subconscious, and it should be a more holistic way of approaching things.
certainly for somebody myself who gets very overwhelmed and with to-do lists, and so I'm going to use these meditations to help focus on, right, what is my next step? What should I be focusing on? What do I need to avoid? Because I get very all consumed and I feel like I need to be doing this and that, which is not helpful to anyone. So if you see this workshop coming up next year, I think she does it every October, I would encourage you to give this a go if you have some kind of creative project, just out of curiosity more than anything. As a visual person, this really spoke to me as a strategy to move forward.
And in addition to my spiritual deep dive, I have been upgrading my altar space, which is behind me. This video is going to be long enough, so I will be doing a separate video on that at some stage, because some of you have been kind enough to show interest in how this works for me. Thank you so much for joining me today to share my spiritual deep dive through the month of October. And if you haven't done so already, please do comment below and share which spiritual rabbit holes you went down, if any, and which decks you really enjoyed using during October. Until the next video, there's a couple of more videos that you can watch in the meantime. I'm Sally, this is my channel, Vaudeville Manor House of Art and Tarot, sending much love to you wherever you are in the world, and I hope you find some peace and joy in your day today. Bye bye.